в дні весняні положили життя на вівтар святий України. Вам руки дівочі не клали квіття, не несли брати до могили. Останній цілунок на вашім чолі не склали матуся, ні тато, ніхто не світив вам свічок в голові. Брати не прийшли поховати останній цілунок на вашім чолі не склали матуся, ні тато, ніхто не світив вам свічок в голові. Брати не прийшли поховати, тортури і смерть не змогли вас зломить. Ви тайну забрали в могилу, по бурнім життю ви пішли спочивать за чесне священне діло. Не сурми вам марш жалібний, не справила тризну родина. Сповнили ви нації приказ святий, вам вдячна за це Україна. Не сурми вам марш жалібний, не справила тризни родина. Сповнили ви нації приказ святий, вам вдячна за це Україна. 3000 років триває війна, смерть першими ліпших ховає. Хто вижив в бою, тих чекає тюрма, між нами невинних немає. Ми впали в бою, ми були молоді, молися за нас, не полиш боротьби, бери нашу зброю собі тоді, ворожою кров'ю її окропи. Ми впали в бою, ми були молоді, молися за нас, не полиш боротьби, бери нашу зброю собі тоді, ворожою кров'ю її окропи. На 40 день вип'єм по святим ножі, змішаймо напалм, хай ясніше горить, хай спалить міста, міністерства, суди. Довічно судилось тривати війні. Ми впали в бою, ми були молоді, молися за нас, не полиже боротьби, бери нашу зброю собі тоді, ворожою кров'ю її окропи. Ми впали в бою, ми були молоді, молися за нас, не полиш боротьби, бери нашу зброю собі тоді, ворожою кров'ю її окропи. Ви жертвою бою нерівні лягли, з любові до свого народу. Ви все віддали за нього, що могли, і славу, і честь, і свободу. За вами борців уже 1000 йде, на смерті, на жертву готова. Прощайте ви, браття, ви чесно пройшли велику дорогу любові. За вами борців уже 1000 йде, на чин і на жертву готова. Прощайте ви, браття, ви чесно пройшли велику дорогу любові.
З днем народження Тарас Shevchenko. That was my friend Taras Kompanichenko, by the way, who I missed today at the Taras Shevchenko gallery, National Museum Gallery, that I filmed at before with my friend Volodya Voigt. And I would love to have seen that today. It's just, I don't always know when things happen. And I know Taras Kompanichenko, so actually, hey, bro, наступного час зрозуміє. Tell me next time, because we get along very well. Chris, how long did it take you to learn the language? Well, I'm still learning the language. But actually, that conversation came up tonight. I'm spending time with journalists, aid guy, and a fixer. And the fixer, she's Chinese, but grew up here in Ukraine. So she says, I'm very local, and she is. And I said, well, the first year I didn't take it as serious as I didn't know I'd be staying here, that took time. But after the first year, I pulled out a notebook in the early part of 2023, went and bought a little notebook. And like some people, I did use Duolingo. I ran through all 3 segments in about a month quickly. I used the practice stuff in it for a while. And I've said before, you're not learning a language unless your brain hurts. Like literally just, And I got so into the repetition exercises in there so I could fast run. I was trying to gain root level memory, the way as a musician I know is that you don't just learn the scale, you gotta rigorously play it so many times it becomes digital memory. And so I would sit there and use the app, and then but it wasn't expanding the linguistic categories. It's a very limited app. It also doesn't function in the same organic way here. So I pulled out a notebook, and I recommend this for people if you're interested, is to think about any language you want to learn, any of them. I think it's true of all languages. And remember that language starts of need, much like when you're a child. You have needs to eat and sleep and clothe yourself and go inside, outside, and things you want. And eventually you develop more sophisticated emotional states. So you want to say something beyond, if people say I'm sad every time, if they only use the word sad, right? Now, I'm not miserable, I'm not depressed, I'm not, what are some other things, melancholy, or different ways of expanding your language about a very similar set of emotions, then you grow up linguistically limited. If you only know the word angry and you only know the word sad and you don't know the word frustrated, same thing. So in English language, using it as a model, there are ways in which the language keeps expanding. So I can always say, я дуже злий, я сумный. But then I went, what's the one for happy? You know how long it took me to just actually look up the word happy? So miserable I am. No. And it is one of my states, happiness or joy, And it took me forever to go, by the way, what the fuck is the word for happy? Хороший, okay. Oh, wait, I hear this all the time. So I used the notebook for language, and we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, because today is the birthday of the great Tsar Taras, and Tsar Taras, as he's sometimes known. And I'm going to try not to give away a little bit of a punchline here. There's a little bit of a punchline in this. I won't tell you that punchline just yet. But in 1814, on this date, Tsar Taras Shevchenko was born. And he was a serf. He was a slave. And he happened to have talents for poetry But more importantly, he had talent for portraits. And this was his probably less known, greater talent. Less known because the poetry gave and the language that he encompassed in his works. Hold on, actually, I'm going to get something really important here. This was given to me. This is Kobzar by Taras, the works of Taras Shevchenko, and it's a specific gift edition that my friend Serhiy and Tetiana Chuganova, Ruslan's mom, gave me. And you can see. Let's see if I can find like, I don't know. I think you can get some of these in here. And these are the words of the great Taras. Now, I have difficulty reading some of the print directly up here. Maybe not. It's largely due to size, my eyes. But online, I could read through these, and I still suck. I still have not achieved the one goal I really had, which was like in 2023. Like, by my birthday, I will be able to recite all of Kobzar, the great poem of Taras Shevchenko. Didn't happen. By 2024. No. By 2023. No. Can I do it by 2026? Only if I try. Namahadsa. But do I have more mastery of it to converse amongst friends? Yes. Do I have the ability to sit with the babusi at the park who are now, thanks to spring returning, I can go sit to them and say, Добрий день, як вас звати? Svetlana, добрий, мене звати Кристофер, дуже приємно. А вас? Людмила. Людмила, did you say? No, Luba. Oh, добрий, я не чув. I didn't hear you. Okay, Evas, Irina, Avas. And I can have a little bit of time to talk to them. And also I can tell them what I do, and I can ask them how their day is going, and I can have a little bit of back and forth. And then it runs into some difficulty because same thing between me and them. We both have more emotional states than that. We have more needs than that, more circumstances than that. And so how did I learn? One, like when I tell people I don't really speak Arabic as much as I speak jihadis and music language. My Arabic is confined to two categories. Music language, I study Ika and Makam. So Ika is the rhythm systems and Makam is the musical systems. And some greetings and thank yous and some, I can hear linguistically differences between like Moroccan Arabic, Egyptian Arabic, Lebanese Arabic, Iraqi Arabic, and I can almost, in many cases, tell where they're from. Not perfectly, not as good as some people, but there's a few pronunciation things that when I hear, I go, you're Lebanese. Here, same thing. I can hear the difference between Ukrainian-speaking Russian nearly 100% of the time and a Russian-speaking Russian on video. I don't get to see Russian-speaking Russian in person, but in the case of videos, it clearly sounds different even though it's the same language. And I'm specifically saying that when Ukrainians speak Russian language, it's a little softer. It has a certain tone to it. But same thing in Ukrainian, my knowledge is largely based in the work I do. So, zbroi, okay, that's weapons. Or kind of related to defense or, like if you think about zesu, zbroi, like weaponry, is the beginning. I have to look up take the words for, the AFU or the defense forces. And like literally, it's like the weapons, S would be Sluzhba or services, and then Ukraina. So I got that part down. Zahisnikiv, or Zahisniki, the Zahisnik, a defender, or defenders, Zahisnikiv. Vopoloni, in captivity. Civilny Vopoloni, civilians in captivity. You see? So the language, and I think this is important since we are on Taras Shevchenko's birthday, and it wasn't on the script for tonight's conversation. I'm going to talk about my article for today. I'm not going to read the article. I think I'd rather you just read it because it took a lot of work. This is all I blame on our conversation the other day with our great friend, Sean Penner, when we had one adage in the conversation about the war, and it sparked a memory of Sun Tzu saying that trying to control foreign territory is very, very difficult and leads to problems. And that these problems are something you can show. And I made the argument that night and then decided to write an article about it, that Russian attempt to occupy Ukraine is going to fail for the same reasons that 2,500 years ago Sun Tzu said this. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. But first, let's stick with the language thing with Taras Shevchenko. So Shevchenko, when he was a prisoner of the Russian imperial, under the tsar, one of the ways he alleviated the stress of being there, or the burdens of being a prisoner, was that he was so good at portraitures that his guards held him, but wanted to learn how to do portraits. So, could you do portraits of our family? Oh, sure. So it elevated him above a standard role he would have had as a prisoner. And this is sort of the magic of it, is that he went from being a serf to, basically our cultural saint here in Ukraine by that path. And it really speaks to a Ukrainian evolution. The song I just played for you by my friend Taras Kompanichenko, this war has been going on for 3,000 years. So it's a clear fucking message, This isn't a 12-year battle. This isn't a 4-year battle. This has been going on for a long time. And it's in the language of the Kubzari, the language of the poets even, that you can see Ukrainian identity. That I say this all the time. I am not a poetry junkie. I have friends in my life who are really into poetry as Americans. Specifically, I'm going to stick to that category. And I just didn't get it. They would tell me about, did you know so-and-so? They're a great poet. I didn't know if they were a great poet or not, because I don't really know a lot about poetry. I can quote Shel Silverstein, Where a Sidewalk Ends. I won't do that for you guys unless you ask. If you ask, I might, but off the top of my head. But I like deaf poetry. I'm a big fan of Saul Williams. Definitely love Saul Williams. And some of the last poets with Umar bin Hassan. So that speaks to me because it speaks to a real condition in the black community that I understand and that I grew up around enough that I hear the words, and that's how I feel. Good afternoon, Lynette, and everyone else. By the way, I'm kind of letting the room fill up. Everyone else, I didn't forget to say hi to you. I wanted to get some more friends in here, but I want to say hi to all friends. So we'll say hi to Jennifer, Nicole, and Dan. And let's see, and superstars. Hold on. Oh, this thing always disappears with. Hold on, I'm going to do it this other way. It always disappears with the lineup. Hold on, I had it right here. If I could see everybody. What happened with my lineup? I had all of you here on the screen. I'm sad. Я дуже сумно. I got to get the screen back up so I can see your posts. Because it's easier on that than on the phone. Bear with me because I actually do want to see you. I'm just going to get this thing to behave. There we go. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't. I wish I could see what the screen looks like. You can't really see anything. All right. Well, at 5 p.m. here, so I cannot believe it. Where did the day go? Trust me, I understand. I actually postponed an interview, and it works for tomorrow. My interview with McCollum and Melnick will happen tomorrow. He was very busy for Monday. I'm very busy for Monday, so we're going to do it tomorrow. So it was a Monday. C'est ponedilok, as we say here. Okay, so, and then Taras, I'm going to leave you with one phrase I think is very important to start off about Taras Shevchenko for another time. And actually, I have some language masters scheduled to come do spaces with. I keep saying spaces. We're so Twitter bound. Substack with us. The videos here. A place here that I like to go to has a password to come in, or they used to. I don't think they use it that much anymore. But boritesia poborite. Boritesia poborite. Fight and you shall win. And I really liked this. Like, I don't have any tattoos, but I thought if I ever got a tattoo, I think I would like that one. Boritesia poborite. Boritesia poborite. Vam bo pomahai. Fight and you shall win, and God will be with you. And this comes from the Kabzar poem. Again, that's in this book called Kabzar. And so, I mean, you see how much there is to read? There's a lot. And I'm going to hold off something. It got kicked in mid-sentence. Don't you hate that? Actually, I like to watch some of my friends do their Substacks, and I'm having to I constantly have to recycle to come in and out. Someone like Timothy Snyder will be mid-sentence. I'm like, damn it, froze again. And I have to leave and come back. But the language, back to the language and acclamation. One of my friends who, if you didn't hear me on Twitter talk about this young man, he's a baby boy. He's like, now he's about 5. No, see, he'd be 4, almost 5 years old. No, yeah, he'd be about 5 because he was born in the first part of the war. And I liked when I came in and I would say, you know, hey, Dobry Ranok, and he'd just look at me like, I don't know you. Okay. And another family that comes in with their kids, like, hey, and he's like, hey, you know, and he gets super excited. So I liked both of them, but I especially liked the one that gave me that look, like, not so sure about you. And I had a very valuable language lesson from him. Because after blowing me off, he stood at the counter of the cafe, and he goes, Mama, ya hochu seek? I want juice. That's what that means. Ya hochu seek. I want juice. And I thought, that's it. That's how language works. Mama, I want juice. Ya hochu seek. Now, when I first got here and I could say, Ya hochu americano, bez moloko. My friend's like, you don't say ya hochu, you say datu belaska americano bez moloko. If you say ya hochu, he's like, I want coffee. If you would you walk into Starbucks and say, I want coffee. I want American, you know, Americano. Or would you say, could you please get me an Americano? Wonderful lessons to learn about language. And he's right. Very rarely say ya hochu. Ya hochu Americano. Ya hochu kavu. Dati budlaska. You know, give me please Americano, bez moloka, without milk. Because what the fuck is coffee with a milk? As Hal Sparks says, it's a milkshake. Anyway. The wonder of Substack, yes. Then, of course, another thing about Ukrainian language is getting its sounds down. So there are some sounds in it that Ukrainians will mostly understand what you're saying when you get it wrong, but it depends on how wrong you get it. There are some that are really close in words, and just like one little difference is the difference between I knew and I filmed. And because I film, I have to get these things right. So I say, Yaznimate. Ya budu znimate. I will film. Yaznimayo or Yaznimav. But no one really says Yaznimav. I filmed. It's usually like it's like I shot. But if you say Yaznyav, okay, Yaznyav. The difference is if I said Yaznav, that's I knew. Yaznyav is I filmed. So the ya sound versus the a sound. Yaznyav concert v'chor. I filmed concert yesterday. Yaznimav concert v'chor is easier for me because it clearly is a whole different word. It's nimate. Znimate means to film, or to shoot. Really means to shoot, in the sense of film. Filmu is another, but I don't use it that much. I don't hear it that much. And so that listening to that ear, Yaznav versus Yaznav. So if you hear Yaznayo, Yaznayo, I know, мы знаем, we know, вы знаешь, ты знаешь. So if I said вы, I get that wrong because вы, which is like formal you to an elder or someone you don't really know. Вы знаете, вы знаете. That means you know. But if I say it more familiar, ты знаешь, ты знаешь. That means do you know? But if I said ты снял, did you film? It's very, very funny. So language, how did I keep doing it? I took a notebook and I wrote these things out. And I discussed this tonight with my friends. I said, well, what I did is I recognized what do we need to know about language? We need to be able to count. We need to be able to identify colors, types of food. There's a lot of types of food, you have miasum, meat, you have fructo, and you have ovoci, vegetables. You have napoyi, drinks. What else? Dessert. Does anyone know what the Ukrainian word dessert means? So, I do like ice cream, coffee, ice cream sometimes. I mostly always forget the word for ice cream until I see it. Even now, if you say, "What's the word for ice cream?" Yazabul, I forget because I don't have ice cream. But the words also, I told my friends tonight, one who's a clearly English speaker and has not mastered the language, but likes it and has some phrases now. I said, if you master the written language of Ukrainian, Cyrillic, you will do a whole lot better. Because if you just read phonetically through the words you see, you would be stunned at how many are transliterated or borrowed words from Greek and Latin or English. Pardon me. So there are some words that used to be, if you went straight to the Ukrainian language side, only Ukrainian versions, the word would be very different. But Ukrainians are now using Western words often, even though there's a Ukrainian word. They'll use a very Western word. So beefsteak. Literally, if you can read the characters, you can see beefsteak. Let's see. Hold on. I got one of my teammates is messaging. I have to find out what this message is. I can stay with you, of course. One of our great filmmaker teammates, no less. I'll leave it at that. Let me find out what he's saying because it's very important. You can text some comments in the space. I'm reading them. I have my other screen here so I can see a lot better what's going on while I do that. But I can't stall this. I can't stall this for 40 minutes to tell you the other side of this. I'm going to go ahead and tell you now. So whereas Taras Shevchenko was born on this date, March 9th, 1814, he died on March 10th, many years later, by the way. So it's always like, hey, it's Dnia Narodzenia, and then the very next day, oh. And we did this in space when my friend Alex Solomaka was reading some Taras Kompanichenko. Some Taras Shevchenko. I keep saying I had Taras Kompanichenko still here. He was the next day. He was he didn't make it. Vin Pomer. The language is very interesting. Thank you for sharing and learning another language. Yes, of course. Let's see. Ah, good. One of my great buddies is back. One of our great teammates. I can't tell you who, but one of our teammates. I'll let him tell you if he wants to or not. OPSEC. But the Ukrainian language also gets asked to me sometimes, how different is it from Russian? And I know this crowd is a little bit more sophisticated than some, so you may have heard this before. But the mutually intelligible signs are there, like because of Russian dominance and imperial dominance. Ukrainians had to learn Russian, but if you actually ask what is the difference in the the linguistic overlap. Ukrainian is more related to Polish Slavic language, not Russian. It's a Russian lie to say that it's closer to Russian. It's not. And in fact, when I do translations from like Kherson and Antonivka, trying to think where I would have heard in my translations Russian language, pretty much in Kherson Oblast. That is, where I listen to it, and it'll be, again, like I said earlier, it'll be a Ukrainian Russian speaker, and their Ukrainian Russian is clearly sounds different than like the SBU intercepts or Russian television, where you're literally listening to Russian. So govorit, as a hovorite, govorit, hovorite. Sounds, it's actually really close, except for it's not. And the softening, I think, is different. Sort of like if you think of how Portuguese sounds compared to some parts of Spanish, but I think even linguistically, I already know this, that Portuguese is closer to Spanish than Russian is to Ukrainian. It's like if you said Romanian, and I wish our friend Fierce was here, because he's actually Romanian, that the difference is that span, like Tex-Mex to Romania, can they understand each other? Probably a little bit, because it has a Latin root closer to the Spanish side. But even that, it's 35 to 36% mutual intelligible language. And is there a Slavic type of alphabet on the keyboard? Yes. So I have my big clunky, and this is a plugged-in keyboard for my laptop, because sometimes I have to type things in Cyrillic. I actually just speak to my phone. The fastest way to do it is tak, я буду, я піду до парку, зараз, скоро, I will go to the park soon, whatever it is. I try to think of some examples what I might say to my phone or whatever. And I don't really rely on the others. ChatGPT has gotten a little bit useful between both Ukrainians speaking to me and vice versa, for basically, especially for certain nuances, to be able to get them done better. There are some more complicated phrases. It's easier for me to clearly say, how would I say this in Ukrainian context, where it clearly identifies the following. It's gotten better. You have to be very careful, and I can say I wouldn't want to do it cold, meaning not knowing anything about Ukrainian language, because that would. Hold on, I gotta pause this video. I want to see myself like moving around my side video. I'm just trying to see your comments, because I see Lynette here, Adam's here, and if I can move this over here, we're going to get this article back up I was going to talk to you about. Forgive me. I'm trying to get too many things. Oh, there's the live now that we had earlier. Okay, now we got it. So, I went live tonight for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to talk about the article that was on today. And two, talk about a little bit about this week's guests. I'm actually planning on going out to the front, so I've been very busy today planning my interview for tomorrow. And we'll be going out to 3 locations, that 2 of which I haven't been to, and I've been to a lot of the country. But a couple of areas I haven't been to. Actually, I'm sorry, one of them is a place I have been to, but it's been a while. It's been 2 years since I went there, and things have really changed, and not for the good. So, been planning on that. But tomorrow we're planning on having Leniie Umerova, a Crimean journalist who was in captivity, and I'm really hoping we'll get all that worked out. I just got a text with her tomorrow so we can get the app installed, because she's not really on this platform, but hopefully she will be. Hopefully she uses the platform. We also still have a plan to discuss with Aziza about her creative work here as a Crimean activist and expression through her work. But I can tell you I'm very excited that Daniel Hodges, Capitol Police Officer, will be my guest Thursday night, 4 p.m. East Coast American time. I hope you will join us, because we need to boost Daniel's account and give him that love I know you have, stand with them, Guys, I mean, if y'all remember, I used to bring on Sergeant Cannell on Twitter Spaces, and he's great. And Daniel, I can tell you already, he's great. I can't wait to have him on. When he did a reboost of the fact that we were on, he says, I like how he said this. Hold on, let me see the things he said earlier. He said, where is it? Where's his note? Because I mentioned we were on. And by the way, thank you to one of our subscribers today who went from not just a subscriber, but a paid subscriber, did a yearly, and that helps. That really makes a difference because, trust me, I think we're going to be okay. Some funds due to my work, regular work, came in, and I'll be able to not panic and stress as much. But I'm a self-funded journalist with a handful of folks helping us. There we go. Daniel Hodges said, tell me that this is going to be a great guest on Thursday when he says, Chris, counterterrorism fellow and journalist in Ukraine, kindly invited me onto a show. We will swap crockpot recipes and talk about the latest season of Love is Blind. Tell me we're not going to have a great time with Daniel without being the way he announces my post, which is the last man standing, Daniel Hodges, Officer Daniel Hodges in the war over what happened on January 6th. Join us Thursday. I'll pop that here in our commentary. But I love his response announcing that he's coming on. Nothing gets my attention better than humor. There we go. So that's in there as well. So check that out and put that on your radar. That will be Thursday night. I can still very easily count on that Wednesday night. We'll put some on there. Yes, I saw the Senate put up the Jan 6 plaque on their side. A little bit late, but there it is. And when is Vladimir Klitschko or Alexander Usyk going to make an appearance? On here? Dude, I would love to talk to Usyk. He's a big deal here, very, very respected. As far as one of the Klitschkos, getting either the Vitaly Klitschko or Vladimir Klitschko on would be. I think what would more likely happen is I would have them here in person on camera, and then I would air it for you. I don't think that we'll see them on Substack doing it back and forth. It'd be cool. I'd be glad to do it. Yes, kicked Fury's ass. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, we got that. Now, let me go a little bit into this article, and I'm going to leave it for you to read more than anything else because I think that's the way it should be done. When I was talking with, I'm sorry, I want to give you guys some data. And although yes, the support empowers me to be able to do work here, it is we doing work because you're not here. So, going from 18 followers, let's see, 18 followers on 1st of September, and then by 1st of October was 26. By 1st of November, it was 40. By 1st of January, 59. We're at 674 now and counting. That's an increase of 3,644%. Молодец. Let's keep doing it. Let's get to 1,000 by the end of March. Subscribers, any kind of subscribers. Paid subscribers, 51 paid subscribers. A few of them are the $80 category. We have one who's a founding member or founder member. That's 240. Basically, by the way, that's how. Well, I don't have it in front of me. Like when things break, like I have to go without. But then when someone does founder level, I'm like, okay, now I can go replace that little microphone for the thing. Like I have other microphones, but there's some that are specific. Suddenly there's an extra $100 I can do. Yay! Okay, it's gone now. Okay, now back to tightening the belt. So founder means you're actually helping to develop the project beyond the guy with the notebook. Also, for instance, if my laptop died, I'm fucked. I'd be a tablet only. There's no money for resources to replace things. These hard drives. One of our friends in the space mails these. This is my very old. This has 100,000 photos on it. If this died right now, if I dropped it right now, catastrophic. And no extra budget to replace or have a duplicate of it. It's just not there. So those things matter, which is why I keep like things like this that have big magnets on it. I keep them away from the hard drives because I would die. And I have actually had that where a little cable pulls a hard drive off. Yeah, it's Western Digital. Well, some of them are Western Digital and some of them are Seagate. I kind of prefer Western Digital, and I prefer the 5 terabyte. Here in Ukraine, if I for the exact same amount of money, I can get a 5 terabyte off of B&H or Amazon or whatever else, or a Target store or something, or Best Buy. I can only get a 2 terabyte here for the exact same price. Okay, and it wouldn't be a Western Digital; it'd be an off-brand Chinese brand, and that matters because hard drives mean like hard drives. I have nine hard drives of data here. I had 3 to be repaired. Thankfully, nothing that I remember being significant. But again, with extra money, if the money budget gets where it needs to be, I can go down to a local data shop that did a really good job on repairing one and saving some very important data. I'll actually mention one of those reasons why in a minute. They don't really charge if they show me the inventory of the files that are on there. It's like, okay, you know what, I can live with all that. Or yeah, let's go for the data recovery, and it's like $100. What's the value of the footage or the thing? You know, do I have it? Okay, is it photos? Okay, maybe they're duplicates. Okay, yeah, let's go with that and save the money. And also, I take really good care of these things. Like when I travel, they get their own case. Can you put things on the cloud, or you don't like that technology? I accidentally, well, I don't do that, but I accidentally did last year, and my I will even call it legendary iPhone 8 Plus died, as I knew it was dying, and it died. And one of our great friends happened to have a spare 11, so I actually like broadcast to you on an now ancient iPhone 11, thanks to one of the people who's actually in the space happened to have one. And I'm like, okay, and I got to plug, and it happened to have a backup of my 8 that was fresh, like really recent. So voila, I was able to get a lot of things back fairly quickly. So I'm not against cloud, but honestly, the problem is when you do video work. I'm sorry, I just did a big concert yesterday with Oleg Skripka. Did I tell you how awesome he is? He was, by the way, great show, and it was a. I'll tell you more about it in a minute, but that show alone, 500 gigabytes of video to do 4 cameras. So that's the main the main camera shot is 120. The secondary camera shot is about 98. The third camera that's close up and everything is 170 gigs. And then the Osmo generates about 90 gigs. So yeah, try putting all that in cloud. My computer would still be uploading them right now. And sometimes I need speed on video. I need to get something down. I don't have a lot of time to edit. I have to get stuff done. I really would rather be writing and getting stuff done. So yeah. Also, I try to be very efficient at that. Can you see? I'm not the only early adopter of a very old Apple phone. Yeah, I don't like to upgrade. I don't like to waste money on gadgets. I would rather put money into a team of journalists here, or fixer supporter crowd, a translator, and sit down and use that money to get more film done. Like I have a lot of this stuff ready for 2 documentaries. Our Defender documentary, which I ran a trailer on in the live stream. My 2 Marine brothers that are home, Artur and Vladislav, and about the waiting that Anastasia did and Violetta did, and I'd rather have the money there to hand to a Ukrainian editor that works here with me. Preferably, if I could find a couple of veterans to do this. I know some veterans who do media work, but I have to think about that. But I do have some editors here, and say, you know what? I'm not going to do the editing where I do all the hats. We have a budget now. We're going to put that money in. Welcome, Anna. And welcome everyone else. If there's anyone else I didn't say hello to yet, forgive me. I'd rather put that money into their pocket. And also, I'd rather those of you who are participating in making sure that funding happens, I want you to see that. Some of you already have. You've already seen that the footage that I air on like the Saturday broadcast, especially, um, you know, some of the, especially the later footage, some of that really was made more possible easily because I can go out and I can get it done and know that, someone sent $50 in, and I know not everyone can do like $50 a month or, $50 every couple of months, like some people have been able to do. But even those folks, I know that, I get the message, hey, something changed. I'm like, man, please don't apologize. Don't apologize when you can't, because I've had to do it too. I've had to turn off some $5, Patreons for people that just didn't have it, because if it's coming in this way, great. When it's not, it has to stop. It is what it is. What else? When that, like, I'm going to see if I can't film. I'd like to ask her if I'd film. She'd probably go with it. But I'd like to film when I go by this little shop. It's a meat shop. But what I like to go when I come into this little meat shop next to us that also has some pastries, I like to go in there and say, hey, I want that persik tort, the little peach cake. It's like a turnover, and then take it with me. Put a little music, go over there and hand it to the Bubba at the front door, because I love that. I love singing, and I love to be part of it. And I spend $35 a month on her. I think no. What do we figure? No, $25 a month. So it's a dollar for each one of them, and she works 3 days on, 3 days off, or 3 days on, 2 days off. So it kind of depends on how many she works. And so I estimated like 1 month I spent $25 on her. Okay. Now she's worth it easily, but it happens when there happens to be some extra funds, and when the subscriptions are there, that means I'm not worried about it. We're paying the server day after tomorrow, which is $300 every month, no matter what. And I'm a terrible businessman on one side. Not for my clients. For the clients, I get the shit done. But on my end, part of business is putting profit enough on there so that you can keep growing the business. I don't do that very well. I'm always giving away at a low price. I've always been this way. But also, my clients are getting older. I have clients that I've been with for 27 years. So one of the checks that will be in the mail that should arrive hopefully today or tomorrow is from a client I've had for 27 years this August. And that means for 27 years, no matter what, in comes the hosting money. But what if I'm using that hosting money not to pay the server and the development, but I keep doing it to fund my journalism, right? I take what should be able to buy me some new clothes and I put it right back into a digital bill in order to have some digital tool, and I use those things. Like I do use digital access to news archives. Not all the time, but do you know that if I turn off my New York Times subscription that I pay $8 a month to, then the next time I re-sign on it, it's going to be 12 to 14 because I got it at a bonus price. So I just pay it, even if I haven't logged in all year. But guess what? I can do that because, or I should say I do use it because I may want to go in there and dig around in the 1920s actual full-blown articles, which they give you access to. My Adobe every month is, and I'm really pissed off at Adobe because Lightroom sucks, but my Adobe is $9.99. That's not a bad price, kind of good compared to the price of Photoshop. There's a lot of these tools that they add up. And what happened this last week that got me in a really stressed panic was I got hit with 2 domains in one day. Another thing after that, like Milanote ran yesterday. Milanote is my digital planner. Actually, I'll show you on Milanote. I think you should. I hope you don't mind. Do y'all mind if I'm talking shop? Is that okay? I think you guys are hip to that. By the way, hi Anna. Let's see, what is this? For me, I listen while I cook when my hands are clean, and I will mash the love button because it's good for us. Yes, it is. Of course, the heart button lets me know what's up. And let's see here. Okay, let's see. Milanote. Where's Milanote? Milanote. I wish they'd just invert it. I'll give you an example of Milanote. Milanote is my planning system for projects. So when I'm doing a drone documentary or drone work, I have all these notes. And inside there, I'll see if I can't do it in there. Boom, boom, boom. I have all these subboards. And inside the subboards, just click one. I have notes from the interviews in each one of these things. So that's one example of the war priorities. Oh, how many topics do I keep up with? This is all the topics I keep up with. Okay. Inside the topics, we can say military life, defender's life. Boom, boom. Tap to open. Come on. Suka. So there's when I keep track of the defender stories. That's here. So you get Dennis Zalizko. That's him talking on iPad with us. The work I did with Dubrova. Okay, we got that. There's Tetiana Chuganova, the Olenivka community projects. There's my 36 Marines and my 501 Battalion board. And there's our documentary for Anastasia and the families that are going on. Maybe when I do my live broadcast. But, for instance, the documentary of the Defender Brothers. That's what goes into all of that. This is what software am I showing you? This is my favorite number one Ukrainian just said some nice things. But this is the layout for the documentary, for instance. Milanote, and Milanote is designed entirely for like documentary level. So if you think about how people doing documentary work put postcards on the wall and color to keep up with it, I can do that, but also it's very digital, and it's awesome. And I'm sorry, you guys are all important, but I have one that is she is a little bit more important than all of you. Yeah, sorry. Also, sorry if y'all didn't get to see yesterday. There's my International Women's Day. That's my photo of Maria, who's a grandma in Lviv. The story of this photo is great. Actually, by the way, ChatGPT took my photo and added the text. So actually, the photos at the bottom of this, like all these little flower things it added. But this photo, actually, I'll tell you about this photo. So in Lviv, I went up to her. She was selling flowers, and I said, "Można fotografować тебе?" No, 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 no. She got mad. She got really mad. And the guy that was doing photos in the square there, who does it like for the tourists, says, "Oh no, no, he's a good American. He really loves us, and he's really great American. And you should see his photos. I know him online." And she's like looking at me like, I don't know. I said, "I'll pay." I pulled out 200 hryvnia, which is about $5, and I wasn't interested in buying flowers. I would, but what was I going to do? Actually, back then, I bought flowers repeatedly and handed them back to the babusi. It was a way to just give them money. Oh, thank you. Smells so good. Oh, la tebe, and hand them right back to her. Go sell it again, make some money. And so, yeah. So that story was a $5. That's a $5 photo. She got paid for taking a photo just to say how much I appreciated her. Please talk shop. I slept 2 hours and only got a quarter of the way through the article of Sun Tzu. Yeah. So I think talking shop at least has one benefit. Okay, so number one Ukrainian, get extra message on that. Sorry, there is a number one Ukrainian. And that's besides Mama. Mama's also Ukrainian. Oh, I sent this over. I didn't go because I was doing a bunch of work yesterday. I didn't get to go see Mama yesterday, but I can always send messages to my best friend, and he'll go in the other room and say, "Hey, Chris is." So we did that photo. Now, also, I made a comment in case you didn't get to see the video I made yesterday about International Women's Day. I want to just remind. I want to extend it one more day because I think every day should be International Women's Day. We're not doing enough to protect women in the world. And there was actually a big rally here. I didn't know it was happening, so I wasn't over across town. But women came out and very boldly stood up for their rights here about a series of policies and procedures that are going on that need to change. I'll leave that to another discussion when we can bring on, maybe my friend Yulia will come in here and talk about those, so we give a good voice. But It's not just here, it's everywhere. Every policy that isn't helping women live the best possible life needs to be absolutely confronted, changed, and it's better for everybody. Lives better for women are lives better for all, period. No exception. Um, yeah. Fuck Donald Trump. So that was really, really important. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get into a little bit about why I wrote this article. And I need to close some browsers because they're distracting me. So, alarm map, 1 second before I close that. Alarm map, what are we looking like? Is it red? It's kind of red in the east, but it's not red over us just yet. Notes for tomorrow. Sorry, I got so many planning items in here. And I wasn't going to cancel the space. Sometimes I'm like, I need to cancel because I need to write. I'm like, nope, keep it up. All right. So, what I learned from Sun Tzu. Actually, I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to go to my other tablet and put it in front of me. Yeah. What did I learn from Sun Tzu? Now, a long time ago, galaxy far, far away. Yes, lives better for women. Period. It's overdue. It's really overdue. Pisses me off, to be honest with you. My grandmother was my saint. Absolutely my saint. And my mom, I would always say, my mom wasn't the best mom in the world. She certainly wasn't the textbook definition of mom at all. Left that to my dad, thus my stepmother, who was a bitch. She was Joan Crawford incarnate. I shit you not. And if she ever sees this, Gloria, you were that exactly what you were. But my grandmother was the best. She took me to Frank's, Sammy Davis Jr. when I was 5. We used to go to Frank Sinatra. She was an awesome woman. She was a juggernaut workhorse. And the reason why I actually made peace with who my mom was is my mom had that, she came out of that era, what I call the Mary Tyler Moore generation, where she could have a career and she could have all these things that previously had been held back from her. Born in 1945. And she died at 66 of pancreatic cancer. My grandmother died at 73. My wife died at 47. So the health care for women is a big fucking deal in my heart. And totally preventable in many of these cases. So, but I thought of my mom was like a person who worked all the time. And I felt bad about it until I got on the phone with my stepdad. And I said, well, I was a little angry and I finally let it out the other day because, she wasn't really, I don't know. I mean, and I went on. Well, Chris, she was so busy with her job, I barely saw her either. I felt also ignored because she was always at the law firm and that's what she did. And I respect that. Actually, I'm glad he said it that way because it's like, that's how it's true. And then we used to have all these dads in the world that like, well, he never said I love you because he was going to work at the factory, but he did. Well, women should be allowed that too. We shouldn't be able to put some burden on women that you have to be the way we want because some little boy inside of me is all broken. That's how you wind up with Andrew Tates, and fuck Andrew Tates. So I'm not going to be in that category as we rant on about this for a month. So I actually defend my mom's ability to be a career-minded person who put that part of herself and the desire to have her life determined that way to be exactly who she was. And let's see, here's the article. Part of herself and the desire to... Shut the fuck up. That's my voice. I don't need to hear me. That's really not how this works. I'm trying to get the article up. There we go. When Sean Penner and I were talking the other day, I think it turned out well. I will say this. The one reason why I wish my mom was around is for her to have seen some of these things because there's no one in my family lived to see what I did. Except for my uncle. I have an uncle left who says that. But let's see. Thank you, Chris, for understanding and forgiveness. It was actually I did that first for the longest time, and then it boiled up recently because of something that kind of got in my system about why couldn't she have done this? And it was not about something for me; it was for someone else. And then that's when I kind of got into the mom was selfish mode and actually, again, I think it's a result of, including some women I do know, that there's some ways in which Wait, who said this? Okay, I don't know. Someone said that. Did someone say that, Lynette? I don't know. I didn't see that part. You can message me who did. So the art of war work, as I mentioned with Sean Penner the other day, was entirely. I don't know what that was. If y'all want to clarify what that was, I just saw that. I don't know. But Sean and I were talking about the. Oh, I see. You said it to yourself. Okay, sorry, Lynette. I appreciate it. I got what you said. Sorry. I made a comment with Sean about how the fact that Putin is overextended and that Trump is now overextended and that the Iraq war and Afghanistan were overextended was something that I said about George Bush in that time. And I have 4 copies of The Art of War, but my favorite is one written by Ralph B. Sawyer. And I was very glad that I was able to message, I don't know if he's Professor Sawyer, forgive me, but Mr. Sawyer at least. I messaged him and said, I really appreciate your book, and I'd like to have you on for a radio interview when I was at KPFT, because I think people miss some things about Sun Tzu. And I think especially I didn't like, just like he says, I didn't like that the art of war for business and that kind of thing, because that has nothing to do with art of war for business. Is totally misunderstanding exactly what art of war was all about. And that's why I started with the article basically explaining the history of what this piece is about. What are the 13 chapters about? Why did it come to a being? And what do we have to understand? And I put the lead part in there that I felt really belonged to George Bush at the time, but it especially belongs to Donald Trump. And that is that during the Warring States period of Chinese history, the king was lazy, more into his pleasures, and had a bunch of problems in skirmishes. So he needed to get someone to come fix it. And he put out a request amongst his high-end staff to go find the masters that did this. And there were certain strategists and warrior wisdom makers that they could reach out to. And one was Sun Tzu, and sometimes known as Sun Yi as well. And he was fairly, after his period of time in service, he became a recluse, and they hunted him down essentially to come talk. And he came in and he says, well, I'll assemble an army for you, per the request. And he says, okay. So he chose to pick 300 women out of the court. And this is deliberate because this is what the king wants. Imagine, like with Trump, how he likes to have his sycophants and his bootlickers, and the people who make him feel important. And using that is important because it shows something of value being used that could potentially be lost. And he had 4 concubines to be the generals. And the orders were to basically apply for, when there was a drum beat, it was called to gathering. When there was a second drum beat, and he lays out the way in which the command should operate. And when he did each of these things, the women of the court would giggle, largely because it's sort of showing the environment of which the softness of the king and the complacency of just living in lives of pleasure. So let's use a modern example, Mar-a-Lago, right? You launch a war from your Palisade Resort, Mar-a-Lago, and you're much more interested in that. It's a great analysis there. I didn't put that in the article. I should have drawn Mar-a-Lago in it. But same thing with Putin. You really appreciate your court, but are you going to sacrifice any of those for the battle? No. And that's actually the fundamental connections in Art of War, I think, that are more important, because Sun Tzu understood that loss is significant. He was a warrior. He had buried his men. And in doing so, he knew these were not expendable resources, truly. He also had lessons learned over a period of time, also in an era which war making was done in a particular way and had particular armaments, but really the armaments. Sorry, I'm right-handed. I need that side more comfortable. The armaments, being swords and blades and such, really the language is written in that time period. The swords will become dull, but it's still symbolically true of modern warfare. And although I'm not a soldier, I definitely have won plenty of quality West Pointers and others who pay attention to these measures. But the metaphor of it is important. The United States staying in Afghanistan and in Iraq showed that the longer it went on, the more Americans went back to their lives, right? And by the way, for those who say I feel honored to be here in Substack, I feel honored to be here with you. That's why we like to do this, and I'm glad that we can more relate to the audience. Hopefully, we'll also get the telephony in here. I'm going to wait until we get back from the front for me to really get that in there because I want to keep this studio wired the way it is, and I'm about to unpack it in the next few days. And so he laid out essentially 13 chapters, and I want you, if you got time, to go read the opening. And also talks about that history I just mentioned to you, but in better detail. And I don't want to just sit here and read this to you. It's 9,500 words. The initial estimations, chapter 1. Sun Tzu opens with a declaration unprecedented in Western military thought for its bluntness. Warfare is the greatest affair of the state and the basis of life and death. The way, the Tao, to survival or extinction. It must be thoroughly pondered and analyzed. And then he gave 5 factors for this evaluation. The Tao, the alignment between the ruler and the people. The heaven, the seasons, timing, and weather. The earth, terrain, distance, and difficulty. And the general, wisdom, credibility, courage, strictness, and law. Organizational structure, command system, logistics. And the 7 comparative questions. Which ruler has the Tao? Which general has greater ability? Who controls the advantages of heaven and earth? Whose laws are more thoroughly implemented? And whose forces are stronger, whose troops are better trained, whose rewards and punishments are more clear. Putin, none of the calculations honestly before February 24th. Now, I go through each one of the chapters and I lay out how, if you read Sun Tzu, and it's just 13 chapters, it shouldn't take you long. It's not, the Art of War itself is not a very long read. If you get like Ralph B. Sawyer's version, it's a longer read because he brings it in there. But just like Putin did not really consider the war that he was going to get into. Okay, let's say not the war he thought he was going to get into, the war he was getting into. And there's a difference. The war he thought he was getting into, 3 days, remember? A handful of days, a week. How do we know? As I wrote in my article about the 4-year, and what did Russia lose invading Ukraine? They had celebration uniforms packed along with them for a celebration in Maidan that never happened. We know they thought it would be quick. But as I lay down further in there, the Tao was wrong before the sentence finished. The society would elect a Jewish president and fight for its own sovereignty. And by honest reading, the population wanted to be. He thought that the population wanted to be liberated by Russians, and he was wrong. The general assessment was wrong. Zelensky did not flee. The supply chains were wrong. His estimates of the supply chains were wrong at every level. The calculation was corrupted before it even started because FSB fed the Kremlin what it wanted to hear, and the Kremlin the Kremlin had made honest feedback dangerous enough that no one would deliver it. Think about that with Donald Trump. Where are the truth tellers? Sir, we can't do that right now. I know that that sounds like a good idea, but we don't think we should do that. Donald Trump's initial estimation for Iran campaign has the same structural failure and running through a different machine. On March 25th, 2025, his own Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, delivered a collection of assessments of all 18 U.S. Intelligence agencies at to the Senate Intelligence Committee. Quote, the IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003. 3 months later, asked about the assessment aboard Air Force One, Donald Trump replied, I don't care what she said. I think they're very close to having one. In 11 words, he disposed of the entire calculation, but as Sun Tzu said, before the engagement, one who determines in the ancestral temple that he will not be victorious has found few factors are in his favor. What about someone who finds no factors in his favor? Both men, Trump and Putin, went to war with no factors genuinely in their favor because they refused to calculate the favors honestly. Chapter 2. I'm cutting through a lot of the read because you should read the article. Chapter 2, Waging War, the economy lesson neither man will learn. Sun Tzu. No country has ever profited from protracted warfare. Hey, Russia, how's that fucking economy doing? I was offered a Pepsi tonight at dinner. I said, please, that's Pepsi. Coke smock spaghetti. Russia has now violated every element of this chapter for more than 4 years. The Russian economy has been restructured entirely around its war production, devouring resources that would otherwise compound into civilian prosperity. Casualties exceed 700,000 killed, and wounded represent an irreplaceable drain on manpower and institutional knowledge. International isolation has compressed Russia's economic space and driven into dependency on both China and Iran, itself a form of strategic defeat. However, invisible day to day. Sun Tzu specifically warns that if a state must transport provisions from far off, quote, hundreds surnames will be impoverished. The domestic economy will hollow out and feed the war. Russia is living this chapter in real time. Am I right? Now, this place of drift is documented in Shoigu's own words. By September 2023, 19 months into the war, expected to last just a few days, he was briefing Russian generals with planning horizon of 2 more years. The consistent implementation of the activity plan until 2025 will allow us to achieve our goals. He's literally planning 2 more years of blowing up the economy. He did not specify the goals. He could not. What he had specified was the admission that the operation would be protracted. The costs were compounding, and the end was not in sight. Days had come to years. Shoigu called it a plan, and Sun Tzu called it the path to ruin. Then there's Donald Trump. Donald Trump's Iran campaign carries a mirror image, risked in more compressed form. Pete Hegseth stood at the Pentagon podium on March 2nd, 2026 and announced, this is not Iraq. This is not endless. Sun Tzu Chapter 2 does not care what a war is named. It cares about the arithmetic. You say 4 weeks, well, it could be 6, it could be 8, it could be 3. They don't have a plan. Hegseth told reporters a few days later, ultimately, we set the pace and the tempo. But the timeline has already begun to slip. See, the cost, 6 Americans dead in Kuwait, by the way, 7, just so we know. And his identity was revealed today. Forgive me, I don't have it in front of me right now, but he was announced today, and I put this on my Twitter timeline earlier. Iranian drones reached communication systems in 7 U.S. bases. Regional allies pulled into a conflict that they hoped to avoid, and were already compounding a schedule no one had calculated in advance. Other principles in the chapter that neither man grasps. One who excels in employing the military does not conscript the people twice or transport provisions a 3rd time. This is actually one of the ones I was referencing in my conversation the other day with Sean, with you guys. Putin, though, has now mobilized, remobilized, and drawn on the prison population. North Korean troops, financial reserves that took decades to build, and he's on his third and fourth draft in this chapter, and it's not getting any better. Chapter 3, planning offenses, and the worst of militarists. Now, this is something that I said about George Bush at the time. This is actually the first time I associated Sun Tzu in any of this analysis, was that in talking about George Bush, sometime maybe 2005 on KPFT, I said to someone, I said, well, you know, Sun Tzu once said that the greatest militarists undermine alliances and plots, and the worst seize cities. Isn't that what George Bush just did? Sun Tzu says, attaining 100 victories in 100 battles is not the pinnacle of excellence. Subjugating the enemy's army without fighting is the true pinnacle of excellence. But that's not what Putin did. That is not what Trump has done. So, yeah. And again, I'm going to skip through because there's a lot in here. 9,000 words. Chapter 4, military disposition, invincibility before everything. Sun Tzu. In antiquity, those who excelled in warfare first made themselves unconquerable in order to await the moment when the enemy could become conquered. Being unconquerable lies with yourself, and being conquerable lies with the enemy. So, the real argument in this chapter is radical with his patience. You do not attack until the conditions for victory already exist. Defense is not a weakness. Defense is the active creation of the conditions under which offenses become viable. And Sun Tzu makes the sequence explicit. First, establish invincibility, and then wait for the enemy to become conquerable, not the other way around. But what did Putin do? Putin violated this chapter before the war started. He had not established the conditions for the conquest of Ukraine, adequate forces, functional logistics, accurate intelligence, an achievable political end state, and before committing any of these troops. He attacked before he was invincible, which meant he was vulnerable the moment his initial assumptions proved wrong. I know, because, by the way, in case you hadn't seen my videos already, I saw his burned soldiers' bodies inside BMPs, and actually I saw more than that. That's only what I put on film. I have jokes about the SVR paratroopers. You know, I said, "Oh, Sergei was the best jumper in all of VDV. He was not the best lander, but he was the best fucking jumper." There's some of him. Yeah, we saw some weird shit in Moshchun. There was a soldier there whose body stayed there for fucking months. No one would touch it. Did you see the body? No, did you see the body? Yeah, it's over there. Like, oh my God, it's the body. VDV. So, Sergei, best jumper, not the best lander. But yeah, he did this to his guys, you know. Good to see you, Oddwood. Welcome. Also, Jackie and others that I see popping in here. Putin stated to Macron in March 2022, the task of the special military operation can I pause there for a minute? What did he call it? Okay. Will be fulfilled in any event. It was not a strategy. It was a substitution of will for preparation. In any event means whether or not the conditions exist. Russia has now spent 4 years paying for that clause, in his words. And then there's Trump and Iran. The same chapter plays out in the same key. On February 28, 2026, Trump announced Operation Epic Fury in a video that listed everything that would be destroyed: missiles, missile industry, the Navy, the proxy networks, and he said nothing about what victory looked like the morning after. We're going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industries to the ground. It will be totally again obliterated. We're going to annihilate their Navy. The objectives were maximalist. The end state was undefined. And then Hegseth declared the mission had a clear, devastating, and decisive mission. Again, says nothing, without specifying what comes after the devastation, how military Damage translates to political outcome, or what Iran looks like on day 2, day 3, day 30, day 300. Or Sun Tzu's measurements framework says terrain, estimation of forces, calculation of numbers, weighing of relative strength, and only the assessment of victory requires the last step. It's skipped. Chapter 5. Strategic military power, the orthodox and the unorthodox. The army is established by deceit, moves for advantage, and change. I'm trying to keep the screen up so I can see your comments. The screen keeps turning off. Moves for advantage, and changes through segmenting and reuniting. Thus, its speed is like the wind, and its slowness like the forest. Its invasion and plundering like fire. Unmovable, it's like the mountain. Now, he's talking about in this particular chapter, and this is one thing I like about Ralph B. Sawyer's work on Sun Tzu, is that as a specialist in Chinese military doctrine and history, Ralph B. Sawyer correctly does say, and I know because I study Shaolin martial arts, is that there are certain words that do not really translate. You need 15 words to explain what one word means, so a Westerner gets in one word the power of something. So she, and I'm terrible at my tonal languages, even though like I did study Chinese for a while. Maybe one day, not today. Chloe Craft joined us. Yes, welcome. She should come back here and join us and do some journalism talk as soon as possible. You're always welcome. Tell me what day you want. If you're Wednesday available, we can come up and talk. We're talking about Sun Tzu and the lessons that Putin and Trump did not learn. My article for today. Now, the image that Sun Tzu uses for Xi is a fully drawn crossbow. Power accumulated in potential form, released at precisely the right moment through the trigger snap. And neither Putin nor Trump has demonstrated the patience or the strength to build Xi before releasing it. Both have fired the bow before it was drawn. On December 2023, after 18 months of failing to take cities at the cost of hundreds of thousands of casualties, Shoigu announced at the Kremlin Defense Board, quote, "The Russian army is the most trained and combat capable in the world, with advanced armaments that were tested in combat tradition." Russia had no chi left. It was fighting Cheng, the mass weight grinding frontal pressure against the adversary that had 8 years to construct responses to exactly that approach. By the way, Ukraine's now teaching America how to deal with intercept drones. Who's got the cards, baby? Thank you for your compliment. Coming from Chloe, that means a lot. Great job. Coming from all of you, by the way, not to dismiss anyone, but standards are a big deal to me, and I appreciate that from a colleague. On March 2nd, 2026 briefing, Minister of War, Secretary of War, I hate that, by the way. The Defense Department, by the way, by statute, is still the Department of Defense. You can label on the front of it whatever you want. It's still the Department of Defense. Anyway, Hegseth described Iran's strategic architecture without appearing to recognize what he was describing. Iran, he said, was building powerful missiles and drones to create a conventional shield for the nuclear blackmail ambitions. That is the precise definition of Qi deployed against the American Cheng. Asymmetric deterrence, proxy activation, conventional systems used as shielding for strategic leverage. The American strategy, Hegseth announced, destroying the conventional shield, is a Qing answer for the Qi problem. The power that insists on fighting orthodox against the master of the unorthodox is ceding the strategic initiative from the onset. Iran has spent 40 years preparing for exactly this playbook. Now I'm going to pause there for a minute before we get to chapter 6. And yeah, can you imagine what Sun Tzu said, 2,500 years ago? Now, I said this when we were, I wrote an article last week. I said the fight against Iraq was in one category and the fight against Iran is going to be a completely different situation because Is it chi as in you have QI? No. And again, I suck at my tonal languages. If I were only immersed in it, I'd get that right. But think of it as CHI apostrophe I. But chi, you're thinking about Diantian power, chi, which we use in Shaolin martial arts. No, I'm not referring to that. But to this thing about Iran, Iran uses unconventional warfare and has proxy power through Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthi power, and others. Has affiliations around the world that are willing to play off the board. And I've said this about ISIS before, and anyone who's willing to play in the the category of end times, thinking like it doesn't matter what I do on earth as long as I slay you in heaven, or for heaven, either way. And they have hackers that are malicious and capable. I have an article that I'm finishing up on the Iranian hackers, which are under ICRC. And IRGC, sorry. I just said that about the Red Cross. Anyway, the IRGC, and they're very skilled and capable, no less. At least to make disruptions that America is not ready to deal with. And more importantly, it's because whereas yes, America can hit civilian infrastructures anywhere, hospitals and all that, the methods like that don't work from the aggressor state the same way they do on the defending state. And the softness of America's civilian population, which is a whole lot softer than Ukrainians, means that the first time certain cyber attacks happen against certain parts of the civilian population in America, I promise you there'll be some pissed off people. If you take out a hospital systems, for instance, think about the ransomware that hits hospitals and different ways in which hackers disrupt civilian life by playing off the grid, playing out of the rule book. Iran's quite capable of doing this. And Putin's forces in Ukraine have been chronically unable to achieve a lot of these realities. For instance, the way in which the Russian military doctrine and force is applied hits unconventional warfare, like including partisan warfare, that they're not prepared to do. And it's largely because in the defense side of Ukraine has to adapt. And has to adapt within resources that are both manipulated by Trump in the current time, by the failure of NATO to get its shit together in the NATO forces or the NATO countries to rapidly supply shells, for instance. So imagine if only we lived in a battle based on shelling, and the 155 shells, etc., being produced. Well, obviously, what was the workaround? FPV drones, which were able to be printed here, manufactured here, and used to deploy to create a buffer zone that kept the Russian forces at bay. So when shells weren't available, adaptation kicked in. Yeah, but did they kick in on the aggressor side? And this is true of defense and attack problems in both war, obviously, but also as a street level guy. As a person that's not a soldier, I can say at the street level, it's the same thing. The person who's attacking has actually more vulnerabilities than the person defending, typically. I have found very few examples, and I'm not saying like in every case, because there are plenty of civilians who are not going to be able to defend themselves, and aggressors are, aggressors. But I don't have a history of being the aggressor in fights. I can't think of an example where I aggress to fight. I'm the one that's ready for the fight when it comes my way, and kind of like my psychopathy is I'm probably too eager and ready for it. I don't know how to turn it down, the offer. But the defense side is always easier. It's just flat out easier. Welcome, Brittany. And so Putin's forces have been chronically unable to achieve this. Russian military has repeatedly presented its concentration points in observation through poor operational security, predictable logistics patterns, and the sheer scale of its formations, allowing targeted attrition of exactly the forces it needed most. Russia has been fighting substance against substance, mass against mass, rather than finding and striking a vacuity. And Shoigu, in his December 2023 summary, said that Russian forces had, quote, liberated a territory 5 times larger than the pre-Donbass republics. Describes a front Russia cannot break through and cannot hold without continuously feeding men and equipment to positions the terrain makes indefensible. And Russia has been attacking the full and complaining that the vacuity will not come of it. Now, the chapter in here also really, I think, applies to Operation Epic Fury. And we're in chapter 6 of Sun Tzu. And I'm reading through it, so you'll have to read the article because I take more time into some components of that. But for the Iran campaign, this same chapter describes a problem for Operation Midnight Hammer, which could not solve, and Operation Epic Fury has not yet solved. Iran spent decades hardening and dispersing and burying its nuclear infrastructure precisely to deny the American forces the vacuity that effective strikes will require. And Fordo was buried under a mountain. Natanz is deep buried in bunkers. And the dispersal program means no single strike consequence addresses the full scope. Hegseth declared on June 2025 that the bombing campaign had, quote, obliterated Iran's army, the Iranian army ability to create nuclear weapons. 8 months later, his own envoy said Iran had a week away from weapons-grade material. The terrain, fully hardened and deliberately so, was not obliterated. It was temporarily degraded. Sun Tzu does not rate the odds of striking the full as if it were empty, and Iran has been filling that terrain for 30 years. Military combat, chapter 7. In military combat, also, let me actually read it better. Chapter 7, military combat, speed, supply, and the lies commanders tell themselves. In military combat, Sun Tzu, what is the most difficult is turning the circuitous into the straight and turning adversity into advantage. The chapter is about operational logistics and the translation of strategic intent into actual movement. And it's almost unforgiving observation that if you march forward 100 li to count for gain, the 3 armies general will be captured. The strong will be first to arrive, while the exhausted will follow. With such tactics, only 1 in 10 will reach the actual battle site. Now, what did that look like for Russia? Russia's initial advance in Kyiv on February 2022 is this precise illustration. The convoy stalled north of the capital, fuelless, unable to be resupplied in long, broken spring roads. Lead elements too far forward for the support to reach. Flanks were exposed to ambush. Speed had been prioritized over logistics. The logistics crisis was documented in Shoigu's own procurement language. In December 2022, he announced that supplies originally scheduled for 2024 to 2025 had been rescheduled to 2023 for emergency frontline delivery. That is, the army without baggage, without provisions, without stores, described in the procurement calendar. And Sun Tzu made a simpler formation. Hello, Raman. Dobry den, brate, dobry večer. Sun Tzu said, if the army does not have baggage and heavy equipment, it will be lost. And if it does not have provisions, it will be lost. And if it does not have stores, it will be lost. All 3 in the first 3 weeks were exactly true for Russia. Now, again, I'm trying to skip through so you can have plenty to read. But for the Iran campaign, the 100 li problem is also active. The American basing and logistics architecture across the Gulf is extended and exposed. On March 3rd, 2026, 5 days into Operation Epic Fury, Iranian drone hit 6 American soldiers at an operations center in a civilian port in Kuwait. The center was a shipping container-style building with no defenses. The operations center is the baggage train of Chapter 7. Struck before the campaign reached its operational tempo. Hegseth acknowledged this in his own briefing. This does not mean we can stop everything, but we ensure that the maximum possible defense and maximum possible force protection was set up before we went on the offense. Now, Sun Tzu would have required that answer before the first bombing even happened, not 5 days after. And so then the Iranian drones also damaged communication systems at 7 military bases. The adversary, who had spent 40 years gaming American strike scenarios, was already mapped out every node of the chain. And by the way, with Russian intelligence, if you didn't catch that news in the last couple of days. Chapter 8. 9 changes and the 5 fatal character flaws. Thus, generals have 5 dangerous character traits. 1 committed to dying can be slain. 1 committed to living can be captured. 1 easily angered and hasty to act can be insulted. 1 obsessed with being scrupulous and untainted can be shamed, and 1 who loves people can be troubled. Now, this chapter requires no translation. It's a direct character analysis of the 2 dangerous leaders under examination. Let's go with Putin first. Putin is primarily the 3rd type. He's easily angered and hasty to act and can be insulted. Hello, CC from Sensi. The purpose of this operation is to protect people for those. This is his quote. The purpose of this operation, Putin, is to protect people who, for 8 years now, have been facing humiliation and genocide perpetrated by the Kyiv regime. Now, the word humiliation is doing strategic work. The entire war is framed as a response to a perceived insult, the NATO expansion, the Western support for Ukrainian democratic aspiration, the failure of Ukraine to remain in Russia's orbit. His decision-making has been repeatedly driven by the need to not appear weak, the refusal to acknowledge the failure of the Kyiv operation until it became undeniable. Remember, he couldn't call it a war. He couldn't even acknowledge losses for the longest time. The annexation of 4 oblasts before they were militarily controlled. The nuclear threats deployed whenever the battlefield situation began to deteriorate. He, of course, had to send, drunk Dima out. And he is the commander who can be insulted. And his enemies have exploited this at every turn. Then we have Trump. Let's see. Glad to have you all here. We're talking about an article Chris wrote comparing Trump and Putin to the teachings of Sun Tzu, the other war. Yes, thank you. And welcome, everybody. I see Deborah and Lisa have joined us. So in case, and Karine, everything that's in here, it's in the article. I'm just reading through. It's a way of us all being together and bonding. Plus, I'll tell you as we go on, I'll tell you more about what's happening this week. And we're getting somewhere. We're almost at chapter 9. There's only 13. Trump is primarily in the 4th category. 1 obsessed with being scrupulous and untainted can be shamed. On March 6, 2026, 6 days into the war with no defined state, he posted in all capitals, "There will be no deal with Iran except unconditional surrender." 0 diplomatic floor, by the way. No negotiating range. The obsession with not appearing to capitulate, with not being an Obama, with not accepting anything short of total terms and visible, by the way, also being a fucking war criminal, and all the things that they've said about all these victories and all the ways they're handling it, they're fucking war criminals now. Just with not being Obama, not accepting anything short of tactical terms, total terms. It is visible in every character of that post. And quote, "No stupid rules of engagement, no nation-building quagmire, no democracy-building exercise, no politically correct wars." Hegseth announced at his March 2nd briefing, also a war criminal, Pete Hegseth. The entire rhetorical architecture is structured around the appearance of toughness rather than substance of strategic outcome. Teddy Roosevelt comes to mind briefly. Big stick. The entire there we go. When the policy fails to produce capitulation, the response is not recalibration but escalation, because any other response risks the appearance of shame. Iran's 40-year survival of similar pressure suggests it has already gamed all of this out and already gamed this trait to exhaustion. Thus, Sun Tzu should be heard. Now, these 5 dangerous traits are excesses in a general. Potential disaster for employing the army. The army's destruction and the general's death will invariably stem from these 5, so they must be investigated. But they have not been investigated. They are being enacted. And thus we come to chapter 9. How are we doing? You guys doing okay tonight? Stimulate them to know the patterns of their movements and stopping. Probe them to know where they have an excess and where they have insufficiency. Now, this chapter is about intelligence and the operational sense, reading the battlefield from its physical and behavioral signs, and then acting on what you read honestly rather than what you wish were true. Sun Tzu gives dozens of specific behavioral indicators. When enemy emissaries speak humbly, but preparations continue to increase, he intends to advance. When words are strong, but the advance is cautious, he is going to retreat. When troops lean on their weapons, they are hungry. And the point is not to specific indicators, but the underlying discipline. To observe is what is actually there, and not what serves your preferred narrative. So, how does Putin do this? Putin's intelligence failure before the war was a failure of exactly this discipline. The FSB possessed extensive human networks in Ukraine, extensive signals collection, extensive open source monitoring. The raw material for honest assessment was available, and the behavioral indicators of Ukrainian determination were all present and visible. A society that had fought Russia to a stalemate in Donbass since 2014, a military that had undergone 8 years of intensive NATO standard reform, a population that had demonstrated repeatedly since 2014 that it would choose political agency over accommodation. And after the Kyiv retreat forced acknowledgement of those indicators, Putin retroactively relabeled the opponent. The Russian army, he told Italian television, had been fighting for, quote, a nationalist groups rather than a regular army of Ukraine. Hello, thoughtful Susan. The behavioral indicators were not just reread, they were renamed to preserve the original false model. So let's talk about how Trump has done this. Trump's Iran assessments contain the same pathology running, but in a different direction. The behavioral indicators of Iranian regime durability under sanctions pressure, 40 years of continuous data, are unambiguous. Sanctions have not produced the regime change in Cuba, North Korea, or Iran since 1979. The Islamic Republic has survived the Iran-Iraq War, the Green Movement, multiple rounds of nuclear sanctions, and the maximum pressure campaign in the first Trump term. His own intelligence director delivered that pattern's implications plainly in the March 25th, 2025 address. 3 months later, asked about that assessment, her assessment, Trump said, well, then my intelligence community is wrong. It's not a failure of intelligence. It's the refusal to probe. As Sun Tzu said, only someone who lacks strategic planning and slights an enemy will inevitably be captured by others. Now, I'm going to pause there for a minute. The fact that Donald Trump repeatedly in the first term and then does it again, literally stood in Helsinki and insulted American intelligence. In both ways you can read that. Shows you everything what's wrong with him. And that's why I said, understanding how Sun Tzu wasn't just someone thinking about military terms. He was specifically telling a king, there's words and then there's actions. There's words and then there's results. There's words and then there's consequences. If you just want words. Chapter 10. Configurations of terrain. The ground does not lie. There are six types of terrain: accessible, suspended, stalemated, constricted, precipitous, and expansive. Welcome, Maria. Sun Tzu's classification is not merely topographic. It's a framework for understanding which tactical points are available and which are physically foreclosed. The ground unlike intelligence reports and political indicators, does not lie. It does not tell a general what he wants to hear. It imposes its own logic on any force that tries to move across it, and the commander who refuses to account for that logic will be destroyed regardless of his will or his weapons. So, in eastern Ukraine, the battlefield was almost entirely expansive terrain, flat, open, without natural choke points, except at river crossings. An expansive terrain, Sun Tzu says, if our strategic power is equal, it will be difficult to provoke them in combat. This is the structural explanation for the stalemate that is characterized in Zaporizhzhia and Kherson fronts. Neither side can achieve positional advantage that would make an offense action become decisive. Both sides are fighting. And by the way, let me tell you, if you don't have the time to read it, I have an audio version of Zaluzhnyi's assessment of this that I did 2 years ago in an audio form, about 2.5 years ago, I think October 2023. Talking about strategic maneuvering, and I turned it into an audio form. I used AI, or not AI, actually, it's 11 Labs, where you can type in verbal prompts and it'll read it in a nice British English if you want, and essentially read out Zaluzhny's assessment of how that it's not a stalemate, but what a position of war looks like. So this is, he actually already did this for you. Both sides are fighting a firepower dominant attrition battle that the terrain itself is enforcing. Putin's offensive ambitions in these sectors have produced minimal territorial gain at a catastrophic cost. And Shoigu's year-end report for 2023 defined Russia's main strategic achievement as, quote, disrupting the Ukrainian counteroffensive. Not advancing, not taking cities, not achieving any objective named in the war's launch, the terrain had enforced its own logic on a command structure that refused to account for it. And Russia's definition of success had regressed from take Kyiv in 3 days to hold the line. And I continue through the Donbass approach, which you can read. I'm gonna move forward. Iran's geography. Zagros and Alborz ranges are deep mountain valleys of the interior and deliberately buried nuclear infrastructure. It's precipitous terrain at the strategic. It is precipitous terrain at the strategic level. And Sun Tzu on precipitous configuration said, "If the enemy occupies them first, withdraw and depart. Do not follow them." The target list of Operation Midnight Hammer named this problem in its own geography. Fordo buried inside a mountain, Natanz hardened underground, Isfahan with dispersed and multiply redundant infrastructure. Every target was full terrain by deliberate design, built over decades to deny the vacuity effective strikes. The effective strikes would require. And when Hegseth, Drunk Pete, declared the bombing campaign had obliterated Iran's ability to create nuclear weapons, he was claiming to have struck the full as if it were empty. The subsequent needed to be struck again confirms that the terrain did hold, yes. What I learned from Sun Tzu, what you must learn too. Lessons Trump and Putin will never learn. That is our topic tonight. And the results of many years of writing about this, and finally, like something we said, for those who don't know why I wrote this, when I did my weekend report, my Friday report with Sean Penner, we passed something, and I literally wrote it on a piece of paper, right, Sun Tzu? This is why you buy me a coffee. I sit down at the coffee. By the way, I verbalize a lot of stuff into my iPad. It's really, I like that there's verbal mode. I can just stand in my kitchen and kind of talk shit to my tablet. Cast into hopeless situations and they will be preserved. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead. Chapter 11. 9 terrains. We have 2 more after this. We're getting there. 9 terrains, fatal ground, and the logic of no retreat. Sun Tzu. Cast them into hopeless situations and they will be preserved. Have them penetrate a fatal terrain and they will live. Only after the masses have penetrated dangerous terrain will they be able to craft victory out of defeat. Oh, by the way, he was not a philosopher. He was a strategist in the time of the Chinese Warring States period. There is actually at the beginning of my piece, I sort of explained the context of the previous dynasty's era and how it had failed and why and what that put him in. He had the burdens of victories and defeats to consider before he was called up before the king. So I put a lot of that history together in the first part of this. And actually, I would, again, strongly, I have to credit Ralph B. Sawyer for doing that very well. I just recapped it for you guys because I have to have it explained into Putin and Trump era, which is what I'm doing. I'm sort of laying out how what he displayed very clearly 2,500 years ago still applies today. Oh, I haven't done the On War by von Clausewitz, which I should consider. And von Clausewitz is a whole different way of approaching this. There's a von Clausewitz angle to all this too. Don't make me do it. Don't make me do it. I have other articles to do. I should do. Hold on. Let me pull out the pen. On War von Clausewitz. Fuck me. Crazy. Він дуже божевільний. He's crazy. Okay, this chapter divides 9 terrain types: dispersive, light, contentious, traversable, focal, heavy, entrapping, encircled, and fatal, and is a typology of human motivation under varying degrees of moral pressure. The deeper the commitment, the less option for retreat, and the more ferociously men fight. This is very important. Sun Tzu's insight is that the general's art includes management of his own troops' motivations, and the most reliable motivator is the elimination of any option other than prevailing itself. Quote, on fatal terrain, I showed them that we will not live. For Putin, the problem is that he has placed himself on the functional equivalent of fatal terrain, not geographically, but politically, having declared the annexation of 4 Ukrainian oblasts, having staked his own domestic political survival on victory, having eliminated any internal pathway to negotiating retreat through years of escalating rhetoric and the destruction of any domestic opposition voice that might have offered an off-ramp. He is now fighting without the ability to accept any outcome short of full conquest. Quote, the task of the special military operation will be fulfilled in any event, he told Macron in March 2022. And that formulation becomes his cage. He cannot leave it. He built a fatal terrain and called it resolve. Sun Tzu warns that fatal terrain produces ferocious fighting in the people placed on it. It also eliminates strategic flexibility, and strategic flexibility is the ultimate source of military advantage. The commander who can maneuver, who can choose to advance, feint, withdraw, regroup, or redirect, controls the tempo of the war. And Putin has locked himself into a position where any meaningful off-ramp looks like defeat. But for Trump and Iran, let's see. What's the rhetoric look like? In this chapter, it contains one of Sun Tzu's most strategically essential passages. When the army of hegemon or true king attacks a great state, their masses are unable to assemble. When it applies its awesomeness to the enemy, their alliances cannot be sustained. Strike before the enemy can organize its coalition. But Trump's Iran timeline, years of maximum pressure, telegraphed military positioning, public ultimata, multiple cycles of escalation and de-escalation gave Iran abundant time to preposition its regional proxy network. The Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hashd al-Shabi in Iraq are full arc of Iranian-backed militias across the region that have already been activated, already calibrated, and already raiding. Secretary of State Rubio explained why the U.S. struck when it did and told reporters on March 2nd, "We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that it would precipitate an attack against American forces, and we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties." Unquote. That is the coalition assembly window already closed. The terms already set by Allies' timeline rather than American strategic readiness. The window for striking before the coalition assembles had closed long before Rubio stood at that microphone. Chapter 12. We're almost there. 2 more. Incendiary attacks. The fire you cannot control. There are 5 types of incendiary attacks. Incinerate men, incinerate provisions, incinerate supply chains, incinerate armories, incinerate formations. Now, Sun Tzu's 5 doctrine is operationally dated because he's talking about literally using fires, and set with torches, with wind and dry seasons, etc. But the strategic principle is eternal. Fire is a force multiplier, but an unpredictable one. Once you set it, you have surrendered control. I hope we have one of our great friends come join us. If you don't mind, I want to pause you for a minute. I think will be good reasons for doing this. One of my favorite peoples. Hold on. Where's the fucking keyboard? One of my favorite peoples has just responded to a message on here, and let's see here. Bear with me. I think you'll appreciate this if we get this done. All right, one of our favorite people. I'll tell you about it later. We have someone that will join, not tonight, but in the near future, someone will be here. All right. Big good thing. Okay, sorry. A very big good thing just occurred while we were live. Yay! Okay, sorry. Putin set a fire on February 2022 that he cannot extinguish and cannot control. The decision to escalate to full-scale invasion after 8 years of frozen conflict in Donbass. This was an incendiary action in the Sun Tzu sense. The drastic escalation whose downstream effects were not calculable in advance and whose termination conditions were never clearly established. By the way, I know people who know me from spaces think I'm fucking around when I say these things, but I aired it directly on here. When I have a pro-Russian come in, especially a Russian, and I'm like, Blet, I smelled your fucking cousin. Like, I smelled the DNA, like, charring inside of the fucking BNP. I'm not fucking around with that. I did. Okay? And actually, the person I was just chatting with made a commentary about talking about the smell of war by people who've never been to war. We're in a war here, we're in a war here. So most of us here have all smelled that. And so, Putin burned his own fucking people. Suka. So anyway, sorry. After 8 years of Persian conflict, so the incendiary action in the Sun Tzu sense, a dramatic escalation whose downstream effects were not calculable in advance and whose termination conditions were never clearly established. What burns now is not just Ukraine. It's Russia's international standing, its economic relationships built over 40 years of post-Soviet integration, its demographic future at its youngest. Its capable citizens flee the country or die in its trenches. Its military industrial capacity being consumed faster than it can be rebuilt. The institutional knowledge that dies with each wave of soldiers who understood how to do things, and the next wave that will never learn. Putin has set fire, expecting it to burn in one direction. And then, like I said, it was unpredictable. Fire, it is burning in all of them simultaneously. Even Shoigu, in September 2023, warned that the West's actions were only, quote, pushing Ukraine towards destruction, but without appearing to notice that Russia was burning in the same fire. And by the way, my Ukrainian friends do everything they can to make that shit burn a little faster for the Russians. Feels good until the fuck around find out part comes up. Now, Donald Trump, February 28th, 2026 announcement that the list of fires to be set, missiles to be destroyed, the industry to be razed, a navy to be annihilated. Well, Trump said, we're going to destroy their missiles and raze their missile industry to the ground. It'll be totally again obliterated. We're going to annihilate their navy. What the announcement did not contain was Sun Tzu's chapter demands be calculated before the torch is applied, where the fire goes after the first target's burned. Quote, the terms of this war will be set by us at every step. Hegseth, that was a quote from Hegseth. Told reporters, let me quote it again. The terms of this war will be set by us at every step, said Pete Hegseth, who is a substandard downgrade from Lloyd Austin III, who had 4 big stars on his shoulder, a superior black man. Sun Tzu's incendiary doctrine does not offer that assurance. The fire does not consult the arsonist before its next step. 6 days in, Iranian drones had struck an operations center with American dead, hit communication systems at 7 U.S. military sites, also with Russian intelligence assistance, struck neighboring countries whose populations had hoped to stay out of, and the fire was already burning in directions it had not planned. Iran's strikes were pulling Gulf states, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait into a confrontation they had tried to avoid. The fire was expanding towards those who had hoped to remain out of it. Hegseth called this a strategic backfire against Iran. Sun Tzu's fire chapter is about long term. The chapter ends with a passage that deserves to stand alone. A government cannot be established again once it has been destroyed. The dead cannot be brought back to life. Both Putin and Trump have operated as though the consequences of military force are negotiable, as though the damage inflicted can be recalled if it proves to be politically inconvenient. Sun Tzu understood 25 centuries ago that it cannot. This is the irreversibility warning. Fire does not unburn. The dead does not return. The calculation must be made before the torch is applied and not after. Are you guys having a good time? I got here 20 months ago. Not sure how long ago Chris started. Oh, I started like a day ago, man. We are so far into this. This is the epic super long read. No, I don't know actually how long we've been. Let's see, it is 12:55. We're almost at 2 hours. Which means that this, and I notice on Substack, if I go too long, it doesn't do the sort of like clips that it usually does with the nice, all that graphic stuff. We'll have to figure that out. Now, this is probably the most important chapter, I think. And in fact, it is the most important chapter. Chapter 13. Employing spies. The foundation of everything. Sun Tzu. Unless someone has the wisdom of a sage, he cannot use spies, unless he is benevolent and righteous. He cannot employ spies. Unless he is subtle and, who's this? I'm having fun. You're reading this article is a great article, yeah. He cannot perceive the substance in intelligence reports. Sun Tzu closes with espionage, not as an afterthought, but as the capstone to the entire work. The reason is structural. Everything that precedes this chapter depends on knowing the enemy's true intentions. All calculations of chapter 1 are only as good as the intelligence on which they are based. You cannot manage the 5 factors honestly unless you know honestly what the 5 factors actually are. He identifies 5 types of spies: local, inhabitants of the enemy's territory; internal, the enemy's officials; double agents, enemy spies that are turned; expendable, your own agents fed false informations to relay; living spies who return with reports. Quote, no relationship is closer than those with spies. No rewards are more generous than those given to spies, and no affair is more secret. Sun Tzu identifies 3 ways a ruler can fail this chapter. He can corrupt the apparatus, building a system where the spies tell him what he wants to hear rather than what is true. He can suppress the findings. He can receive accurate intelligence and discarding it because the conclusions are inconvenient, or he can destroy the collection capacity entirely, firing the spies before the war begins. The chapter does not rank these failures in order of severity because all 3 produce the same result: a general who moves without knowing the enemy's situation. All 3 are present in the present moment. Welcome, Sam. Thanks for joining us. We're finally at chapter 13, but you can run the tape back on the whole program. And you can also just read the article. We're just kind of verbalizing through it. Now, let's play this out with Putin. Putin's failure was the first mode. The FSB possessed extensive human networks in Ukraine, extensive signals intelligence, extensive open source monitoring. The raw material was available, but the institutional culture had made honest assessment structurally impossible. And telling the Kremlin what it did not want to hear had become more dangerous than telling it what it wanted. The behavioral indicators of Ukrainian determination were all visible. A society that had fought Russia to a stalemate in Donbass in 2014, a military transformation by 8 years of NATO standard reform, a population that had twice chosen political agency or accommodation. Analysis conveniently converted true intelligence into false assessment anyway. The result was a war launched against a picture of a Ukraine that did not correspond to actual Ukraine. Now, Trump's failure to encompass the second and third nodes simultaneously, and what is remarkable about them, and actually I could do, well, I sort of did one the other day. I'm trying to see where all my notes are. I keep switching around here on my browser-ish. What was the title of that I did the other day? About, I usually forget the titles last because I'm always focused on what the item is. Hold on. Let's go to the wiretap. Yes. I rebuilt the wiretap homepage, by the way. It's now looking like a newspaper because there's so many different things we're doing. We have our interviews that are being done, and we have our articles ready. Oh, hold on. That should do it. It's under feature articles would be like these. Blind in the Darkness of War. I wrote this last week. So when the information came out about the counterintelligence teams that had been disbanded. Anyway, how Kash Patel is the thing I don't fucking understand. Anyway, Trump's failure to encompass the second and third nodes simultaneously, and what is remarkable about them, is clearly now public record documents, each one. Second mode, suppression. On March 25th, 2025, Gabbard delivered the intelligence community's collective finding to the Senate. Iran was not building a nuclear weapon. The Supreme Leader had not authorized the program, and Trump dismissed it publicly. I don't care what she said. I think they're very close to having one. What did Sun Tzu just say? Did I just read to you? Then a whistleblower filed a complaint with the intelligence agency inspector general alleging Gabbard's own office had blocked the distribution of a highly classified intelligence report for political reasons for 8 months, preventing it from reaching Congress. The spies told the truth. The institution suppressed it. The leader overruled what remained. Third mode, destruction. On February 26, 2026, 2 days before Operation Epic Fury launched, FBI Director Kash Patel fired at least a dozen agents and staff across the country. The stated pretext was the Mar-a-Lago investigation. What he actually dissolved, according to reports from the New York Sun and NBC News is confirmed by four former officials was that the Counterintelligence Unit 12, or CI-12, FBI specialized. Sorry, I'm getting notices here. I'm trying to make sure I'm paying attention to what you're saying. So, hold on. Back to your live feed. That the CI-12, the FBI specialized Iran counterintelligence unit, had been disbanded. The unit had prosecuted Monica Witt, and I have a whole thing on Monica Witt I was going to publish. I think you can just go read it elsewhere, but very, very interesting spy case that maybe I'll do one later on it. Air Force intelligence specialists who defected to Iran. The unit had tracked Iranian assassination plots to American soil, mapping Tehran's espionage networks, and understood Iran's doctrine of coercion against dissidents and dual nationals. That unit no longer exists. The firings did not occur in isolation. Attorney General Pam Bondi had disbanded the FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force on the first day in office, the unit that investigated covert influence operations from Russia, China, and Iran. The NSA's director, Timothy Haw, however you say that name, 34-year veteran with unanimous Senate confirmation, had been fired from April 2025 after a conspiracy theorist told Trump, that was Laura Loomer, he should be dismissed. Gabbard had gutted the ODNI by more than 40% and terminated the Foreign Malign Influence Center. FARA enforcement, the legal architecture for catching Americans secretly working for foreign governments, had been reduced to a shadow. 23% of the FBI's 13,000 agents had been reassigned to immigration work. The State Department's Global Engagement Center, which tracked Russian, Chinese, and Iranian disinformation operations, was shut down entirely. Quote, "It's now a free-for-all in foreign intel services seeking influence," said former FBI counterintelligence chief Frank Figliuzzi. Robert Anderson, who ran FBI counterintelligence from 2012 to 2014, called it a disaster. Sun Tzu: "No relationship is closer than with spies. No rewards more generous than those given to spies. No affairs more secret." The administration's position was the inverse. No relationship was cheaper, no expense worth protecting, no affair is more secret than the internal politics grievance that justifies the firing. Iran's intelligence officers are still there, but CI-12 is not. The United States went to war with Iran on February 28, 2026, in a condition of deliberate, systematic, self-imposed blindness to the Iranian intelligence operations on American soil. The country that CI-12 existed to monitor had just become an active theater of war, and the men and women who understood the country's espionage operations, who cultivated sources and built cases and mapped networks through the years of patient work, were unemployed. The institutional knowledge they carried does not transfer in the digital file. It existed in the practical judgment of officers who could no longer exercise that judgment in the service of the United States. And Sun Tzu does not describe this a category for this. He assumes the ruler wants to know. He assumes the ruler understands that the spies are the foundation for everything, and that without them, every prior chapter is built on air. He did not account for the ruler who fires the spies before the battle begins, because in 512 BCE, that possibility does not seem conceivable. A general who dismissed his own intelligence apparatus on the eve of a war would have been misunderstood immediately, universal, as having forfeited the campaign itself. Thus, this is a quote from Sun Tzu, thus, only the enlightened ruler and the sagacious general who are able to get intelligent spies will invariably attain great achievements. This is the essence of the military, what the three armies rely on to move. What the three armies rely on to move. Not the truth that the leader wants, not the truth that's actually there, not the truth that is, in the American case, was collected, suppressed, dismissed, and finally structurally and permanently made impossible to collect at all. And then I go into what the book ultimately teaches. Actually, there's a couple of things in here. We'll do it. It's not. We're at the end. Sun Tzu is not a book of tactics. It's a book of rationality under extremity. A systematic argument that war, the most emotionally overwhelming of all human activities, is nevertheless susceptible by rational analysis, and that the leader who applies rational analysis will defeat the leader who does not. It has now been more than 20 years since I read that line about the worst militarists seizing cities and watched Bush proceed to do exactly that. In those 20 years, the cast has changed and the technology has changed, but the failure mode has not. Putin launched a war premised on a fantasy of how Ukraine would respond. One second, I want to see my second monitor so I can see you. It sometimes just wants to turn off for no reason. Putin launched a war premised on a fantasy of how Ukraine would respond. Trump launched a campaign precisely on a fantasy on how Iran would respond, first through maximalist pressure, then through Operation Midnight Hammer, then through Operation Epic Fury, each escalation under another attempt to force an outcome the initial false estimations promised and reality refused to deliver. Both fantasies are a product of the same underlying defect, that leaders who surround themselves with people who confirm what they want to hear, who build decision-making environments that filtered out intelligence that contradicts the preferred narrative, who chose the emotional satisfaction of words over the harder discipline of substance. The Gabbard case is the strongest edge of this. In 2020, she was selling T-shirts for $24.99. The text on it read, "No war with Iran." In a Fox News interview the same year, she warned that an all-out war with Iran would, quote, make the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan look like a picnic. She said it clearly. She understood it. On February 28, 2026, she was sitting in the Situation Room while Operation Epic Fury launched. She liked the words. 6 years later, she was presenting. 6 years later, she was present for the substance. Now, Sun Tzu said to King Holu, standing over the bodies of two beloved concubines, "Your Majesty only likes the words. He is not able to realize their substance." See, the king had an army. The king had resources. The king had the authority. He liked the words, but he did not realize the substance. 25 centuries later, two of the most powerful men in the world are making the same mistake. One frozen trenches in eastern Ukraine. One in escalating operational architecture of war, whose end state no one in the chain of command has publicly defined. And Sun Tzu wrote for these men, specifically to warn people around them that the cost of delivering honest counsel to a leader who does not want to hear it is always lower than the cost of not delivering it. The book is 2,500 years old. Neither of these men have read it, or worse, if they have read it, they liked the words and proved entirely incapable of realizing its substance. And that, my friends, is today's report. And I would like to say that here now in Ukraine, it's 1:10 in the morning, which makes it May 10th. And on May 10th, in 1861, the great Kobzar, Taras Shevchenko, passed away. Thank you for joining tonight. Please consider to be a sponsor of this program that's brought to you by you. That's why we're here. Good night, everybody. Don't forget to join us. We'll be here throughout the week. Tomorrow night, Tuesday night, we're going to have Leniie Umerova, Crimean journalist who was in captivity, and she will tell you things I don't even know, things I haven't fully explored. I can't wait to talk to our dear sister, and I hope that you will be here. I put her. I filmed the video of the event here called Empty Chairs about the journalist in captivity, and you can see some of her words there. And then on Thursday, we will have Daniel Hodges, and can't wait to talk to my awesome soldier, officer at the Capitol who, I reminded you guys that January 6th was my 30th anniversary of my late wife, and I still had a far better day than those guys who were getting beaten. We have to stand in solidarity with Daniel Hodges, Sergeant Ganell, or Officer Fanon. I forget Fanon's rank, but he's on fire on this platform, Officer Ganell, and Harry Dunn, who's running for Congress. Stay tuned often, because I will post if there's suddenly an announcement to go live or something like tonight. I didn't plan on doing this long. I just said, you know what? It's Monday. We need to do something. I didn't do one last night, and I appreciate you deeply. Thank you so much. Slava Ukraini, Heroam Slava, I Pizdets Rossiyska Federacji. And fuck Trump.